How you doing, guys? This is Eric from rulewasteland.com. Sure, you've seen a bunch of prepping and economics commentary related channels talking about this as it's popped up. That's where I first heard about it, with some of these other channels. But there's been some articles going around about how China, the Chinese government, is actually urging its citizens directly to stock up on food supplies for the coming winter/spring. So obviously it's something that I've been talking about, something a lot of other prepping channels have been talking about, but it is interesting for a couple reasons to see the Chinese government directly telling its citizens this. Now, first of all, for the obvious implications that it's real, for those of you who, thought that this wouldn't be an issue or that other people didn't think it was. We now know that that's not the case for sure, 100% certain. And like I mentioned in one of my recent videos, when it comes to these sort of like panic buying, supply chain, or availability issues, it doesn't really matter if there was going to be a real supply chain issue or a real availability problem. If enough people think that there's going to be and thus try to head it off, then there will be. And when there also is a real reason why this is happening, and you compound it with the panic buying or the stockpiling that I think you should be doing, then it can obviously exacerbate it even worse or have it start to happen a little earlier than it would have otherwise, giving you even less time to prepare. And so interesting to see that the Chinese government's going directly to its citizens and saying that they should prepare. Let me read a brief. There's lots of versions of this article. It's on Zero Hedge. It's on Forbes, Bloomberg, I think. This one is CNN Business. It says China is urging families to stock up on food specifically, as supply challenges multiply. It says China is telling families to stock up on food and other daily essentials as bad weather, energy shortages, and COVID-19 restrictions threaten to disrupt supplies. The country's Ministry of Commerce late Monday issued a notice directing local governments to encourage people to stockpile daily necessities, including vegetables, oils, and poultry, in order to meet the needs of daily life and emergencies. The agency also urged local authorities to make sure that people have an adequate supply of essentials this winter into next spring, and told those authorities to keep prices stable. That's an interesting aspect too. A source of anxiety in recent weeks as the cost of vegetables has surged throughout China because of unusually heavy rainfall that has hurt crops. Is that the reason? Who knows? It's probably, there could always be exacerbating reasons, but interesting that they mentioned price controls too, which usually almost always make these situations worse. Because if you're, like I said, people always are going to want to get as much for themselves as they can. And I've said recently how I don't think that's even a bad thing to prepare for you and your family. But when businesses or individuals are prevented from raising their prices, then there's no reason not for every person not to buy even more. To whereas they might control their spending a little bit if prices are allowed to go way up, leaving some available for the people who really are desperate or really couldn't get it early or waited last minute, whatever. Instead, if you go into the store and everything's the same price as it always is, and you know there's going to be shortage issues, you're going to buy as much as you can. They might control for that as well in a place like China, and just have rations. But price controls just don't fix the problem, because the problem isn't the price, and in many ways the price changing or inflating or surging or whatever you want to call it can actually help control the supply issue, at least in the short term, because you aren't just going to buy everything if it's at the actual, what would be considered equilibrium price for that current event. The other interesting thing about this is how you see the Chinese government cares, they don't care about their people individually, but they do care about their country, and they don't want anything to descend into chaos, so they're going to do what they think is necessary to prevent that. And I'm under no illusions about how the Chinese government values human life, even the lives of its own citizens. But it is interesting to see how they care much more about their country as a whole than a lot of these Western countries, especially the U.S. And I have no doubt in my mind that the United States would, does and is kind of choosing to hide that information rather, to avoid panic or for whatever their reasons are. They'd much rather not tell people to prepare for fear that they would go panic buying or whatever they want to call it, than to try to get people to keep the country as stable as possible. So that's always disconcerting. But it just goes back to what we've been saying over the the recent months. Make sure you have everything you need, and the prices are going to go way up regardless of whether we have massive food shortages or not. But especially if we do, the prices of things that we need are going to go way up, and the prices of things that you don't are going to go way down, because people will be forced to put all their money towards their necessities, like food, like energy, like housing, like all the things that they don't include in the inflation reports because it's too volatile, but it's actually what costs, constitutes the majority of people's day-to-day spending and what really makes it painful in these inflationary situations. So the only thing you can do, and I'm not obviously not a financial advisor, kind of like the how the economic ninja is just a guy with a bro hawk and a dream. I'm just a guy with a Johnny Bravo and a dream. So that's a really good channel too. You should go check him out if you haven't already. But my opinion on this as a non-financial advisor is that you should stock up on the things that you know you're going to use anyway at current prices, especially if they're shelf stable. And then put your other money in things that are going to at least rise with the cost of food and energy and housing and whatnot. That could be gold and silver, which is, because of corruption in those industries has not risen as much as we would expect, but cryptos are doing really well. Obviously, the big ones are the safest one, Bitcoin and Ethereum. I do think that they will tend to perform fairly good as inflation hedges because, like I mentioned in a previous video, they're going to be a blow-off valve for gold and silver. Yes, I do think at some point when there is a currency crisis that is out in the open that everyone realizes and is flooding out of dollar-denominated assets or looking for a specific inflation hedge, they're going to flood into gold and silver. The gold and silver market's too small. It can't absorb the same amount of money as the crypto market can when you're talking about physical gold and silver. When people actually decide they want physical, there's just not going to be enough of it. The people who have it aren't going to want to sell. People don't understand it. They're worried about, like having something physical shipped to them. They're worrying if it's real, about selling it later. None of those concerns. I'm not saying that those aren't, things that you should worry about because I'm not worried about those. But when people are just panicking and want to get their money to something that they think is going to go up with inflation, it's a lot easier and quicker to get into crypto. And so I do think that that's going to be a blow-off valve for the demand that can't find the physical gold and silver, and it'll happen pretty quick. So I would definitely get into you can, like I mentioned before, you can get free money just from signing up and putting a little bit of money on there. I'll put a link in the description. I think if you put $100 on Coinbase, you get like $10 free, and then you can get a bunch of people to sign up under you and get get $10 free from them too. So you could be free rolling pretty quick and at least have a little bit, at least a toe dipped in, and not worry about having that fear of missing out, that FOMO. But yeah, so put your get the things that you need physically are obviously the most important. Energy independence is huge. I really am wishing I had like a big solar setup. If you have the opportunity or the ability to become energy independent in even if it's a small way, I definitely recommend that because the prices are going to go up on that pretty hugely as well over the next few years. But very interesting to see China specifically come out and exhort their citizens to specifically buy food. Vegetables was an interesting one. I don't think you should stockpile fresh vegetables. Maybe canned vegetables, but I always go for calories. If it comes down to it, what you need to survive, something like a can of green beans, this isn't going to sustain you very long versus rice or pasta or a can of potatoes or regular beans. So just keep that in mind too. Don't just buy the stuff that you like. Buy something that you are going to eat and will eat anyway, so it's not wasted if nothing does happen, mercifully. But don't waste your money on things that, if the food does become scarce, isn't actually going to sustain you either. So keep that in mind. Thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you later.